Welcome to AskPsychSessions with Marianne Lloyd, where we ask some of the best teachers we know questions from you, our audience. If you have a question or an idea for a conversation, please visit bit.ly/AskPsychSessions. That's bit.ly/AskPsychSessions. All one word, all lowercase. And here's our next question.
Thank you so much for joining me. Today I have two guests in the studio, Drs. Christian Williams and Dr. Cinzia Pica, both from Assumption University. I'm glad you could be with us today.
Thank you for having us.
So as always, before we get started, I'd like the listeners to hear a little bit more about who you are, what your training is in, and what you're teaching right now. And then we'll talk about why you're here. So why don't you kick us off, Cinzia?
Sure. So I'm Cinzia Pica, and I am a professor and currently the chair of the Human Services and Rehabilitation Studies Department at Assumption University. And I'm also the director of the Women's Studies program there as well. My background, my first graduate experience was in community counseling. And so my first phase of my professional life was as a practicing psychotherapist. I left that work and returned to graduate school for a second master's in risk and prevention. And then ultimately my doctorate in child and family studies. And I have focused my research on intergroup relationships, specifically interracial friendships in children and adolescents. And that work led to sort of another iteration of work on intercultural education and really a critical examination, a critical analysis of the framework. Another aspect of my research is the scholarship of teaching and learning, which is more of what we're going to be focusing on today.
Great, thanks. And what are you usually teaching at Assumption?
Well, I am currently teaching the course that we're going to be discussing today, which is Applied Interviewing Skills for Helping Professionals. It is the only course I teach now that I'm chairing the department. However, in the past, I have also taught courses on prevention and intervention strategies for working with young people, principles of case management, course on family systems, and other courses that are part of our core.
Great. Also known as things I've never taught. So I love to have guests on here that do not overlap my teaching variants. Thanks so much. Christian, could you tell us about yourself, please?
Sure. So my name is Christian Williams, and I am an assistant professor in the Department of Human Services and Rehabilitation Studies at Assumption, so with Dr. Pica. I have a PhD in clinical psychology, and so I'm actually a practicing psychologist and have been for about 18 years in our local community. My practice primarily consists of first responders. So, I look at grief, trauma, loss, how that kind of all intersects in the line of work for them, kind of all of those things. At Assumption, I am also the coordinator of the concentration on working with children and adolescents in community settings. And so a lot of the coursework that I teach is similar to the things that I practice in. So I teach a class on grief and loss. I teach a course on crisis intervention. I teach human development. I, like Dr. Pica, teach applied interviewing and helping skills. I teach psychiatric rehabilitation. I've worked in our fields in a variety of different settings for the last 18 years. And so, for me, it's really about infusing practice, right, with pedagogy and preparing the future practitioners. I think that is, for me, why I decided to go into education full-time about 9 years ago now. Because I realized that as, good as I think I am sometimes as a practitioner, that I can only do so much there. And so it becomes a lot more full circle when I can practice, when I can prepare future practitioners. And I also try to take interns into my local practice to give them the hands-on experience.
Great. Thank you. So you two are here today because you are the final guests in our series about winners, congratulations, of the latest round of the Society for Teaching of Psychology's instructional resource grants. And your project was called Open Pedagogy and Video Modeling for Interviewing Skills in Undergraduate Students. So tell us a little bit about that, understanding that the project's not done yet, but what sort of have you done and where are you headed?
So I think what I'll do first is to give you a little bit of context, and then perhaps Christian can say a little bit more about the grant and what we've been up to over these summer months. The Christian and I work quite collaboratively. We've done several projects together. We've written together. But one of the great joys of my professional life is to collaborate with her on this applied interviewing skills course. We have typically taught it at the same time in a semester, different sections. And so we plan it together, we plan assignments, we design our syllabus together. And we have been very interested, because we focus a great deal on our pedagogy, in really developing the course over the years. And we've adopted different assignments, different projects. The class is an experiential learning, project-based course where students really learn counseling skills and they apply them consistently in class, during class time, in assignments. So it's an application-focused course. We typically learn a number of counseling skills, and then each week that we are learning a particular skill, we practice that. We do exercises in class. We separate into dyads, and students get to practice those interviewing skills, those counseling skills in real life. And in the past several semesters, we have incorporated opportunities for students to practice these skills outside of the walls of the classroom. So we have interviewed members of the community. We have participated in projects such as the Worcester Women's Oral History Project, where we have helped the project to collect life stories of the participants. So it is a class that focuses on learning about interviewing and doing interviewing. And the project came out of a need for us to have resources that were not available, and that we were having a difficult time finding to demonstrate these skills. And I'll let Christian talk a little bit more about sort of this gap in resources and how our project aims to fill this gap.
Sure. So, one of the things that's always useful when we're asking students to step outside their comfort zone, right, and to practice skills that feel foreign to them, and I think for a lot of times for students, they think that they're going to make great helpers because they give great advice to their friends, and they're such a good listener. And, they come into the classroom and they quickly learn that they're not, right, honed in on the way in which we do this in a helping profession. And so, a lot of this class is really around having them step outside their comfort zone, having them practice these skills that they just haven't used in the same way before. And so, one of the things that we like to do is have modeling opportunities for them where they can actually observe, right, someone doing these skills well. And, we've spent a lot of time looking for resources. And what we found is that a lot of the resources are out of date, right? They don't, represent a wide diversity of individuals, right? They are not always students that, videos or, modeling things that students actually can find relatable, right? And then that makes it more challenging at times for them really to be able to develop those skills in a way that works. One of the things I tell them is you learn just as much after you graduate from our schools out there talking to people as you do in these classrooms. And, the being able to listen to how somebody says something and be like, oh, I like that, I'm going to use that again, right? It doesn't happen if they can't connect with the resources that we're using to model those things. And so, from this kind of gap that we were seeing and just not having good video demonstrations, we decided to apply for this grant to see if we could help to fill that gap. And so what we're seeking to do is to both provide, brief vignettes where they'll get to observe each of the skills that they're going to learn in the class that are useful, in the basic counseling realm. And then also, right, scenarios that are relatable that they can respond to. So it's kind of twofold for us. One's the, modeling of the actual skill itself, right, in a session. And then the other is these vignettes that they can respond to where it's actually someone telling their story, right? And then they get to kind of bring that back. And so our hope was that it would really where it ties into kind of the open pedagogy is that it really takes our students out of that, I'm the recipient of the learning, which is what this course is all about, and puts them as the co-creator, right? That I'm having something that's relatable. I can create these responses, right? And that I can actually be centered in this learning experience.
Thank you. That sounds very helpful. Maybe before I talk more about the class, do either of you want to sort of talk about this idea that it's about listening? I don't know what your kind of broader campus discussion around things like annual reports and goals are, but we talk a lot about oral communication, right? And I feel like maybe we don't talk about the listening side of oral communication, right? We talk about students providing information, but as you were just saying, this whole course is about being able to listen well. So is this, I'm thinking about as a job skill, even if these students don't want to become counselors, I assume this course is still really helpful in terms of being a better communicator. So does one of you kind of want to talk about sort of how you see this working? And if you feel like it, maybe give those of us that have never taken a counseling class just a nugget of, you might be good at listening to your friends, but it doesn't make you a good counselor. I did hone in on that. I was like, well, I wonder what a good counselor does.
That difference between listening to respond and listening to understand, I think, is that real foundation of where we try to get our students to start from, right? I mean, the purpose of being a helper, no matter what it is, right? No matter what situation you go into, even when I do a supervision session with someone, right? I really try to, encapsulate all of these skills because they're just helpful in true human communication. But think about it. When was the last time that you sat with somebody and you felt like they were hanging on your every word, right? That they were there to not just hear, right, so that they could respond to you, but to genuinely understand you, right? They didn't offer you advice. They didn't tell you another experience they had because, me too, right? And even though that's a thing that we do to relate to people, it's a social, right, skill, but it doesn't actually tell anyone that we're really genuinely present in their experience, that we're trying to understand it from their lens, right? And so we do spend almost all of the course but really talking about the number one thing we can do is to communicate to this person that I am here with you in this space. I am seeking to understand this from your perspective and to help you, right, find and build a path forward.
And I think you're absolutely right. I think this course is incredibly helpful to those students who are going into the helping professions, whether that's, in healthcare or behavioral health or any of those things. It's helpful if they're going to graduate school, but it's actually a course that's helpful to every student, not just, students in psychology and human services and the health professions. Listening for understanding is a foundation for multi-perspectivity and the capacity to allow multiple perspectives in a room, because it's, again, not listening so that I have a point that I'm going to now debate, right? It's just listening to get a sense of how you're thinking, how you're experiencing the world. It allows for building rapport. And that's going to be important to all students, right? They're all going to be working with someone somewhere in their professional lives. And so it builds rapport. It allows for collaboration. We can't collaborate if we don't understand what the other person is bringing to the table. So I think it is such a transferable skill for all of our students, regardless of their field and their discipline.
And I'm going to guess that some students, it's also a good experience to realize what they thought they wanted maybe isn't what they want to do this all day, right? I think some of us have more capacity for that kind of listening to understand. Some of us may realize, like, that's not what I want to do. Like, how do I get to give people advice? Where is, that job? So if you either of you have an anecdote of someone saying, oh, thank goodness I took this class. Now I'm not going to go get a graduate degree in, counseling, for example.
I've actually never had that happen to me before, because we spend a decent amount of time talking about how it applies to each one of the places that they're going, right? And so I don't think, like if I have a student who went to optometry school, actually, after she graduated from us, like we talked about how it was applicable in that patient, right, practitioner relationship, right? And so no matter what, if you're going to go into HR, if you're going to go into nonprofit management, any of the things you can imagine, you're going to go into business, being a good listener makes you better at all of those things, right? Because I'm going to come up with a really good business strategy if I listen to you well enough to understand you. Right? And so we spend that time really talking about how these skills are applicable in such a wide variety that I've never had a student say, oh, hey, like, thank you for this. I actually don't. Well, and thanks, but no thanks. I'm going to take the door. I have had students, we really recognize how often this kind of behavior doesn't exist, right, in the real world. Like how often they're friends and they don't engage in that manner, right? They become so much more aware, right, of everyone being on their phones and be like, right? Or how often people fidget in their pockets and do all of the things that just are not attending to someone or not actually being present. But I don't know if you have, Cinzia, but I've never had someone say, hey, all set.
No, I haven't either. In the summer, I often get emails from students giving me updates about how they're doing in graduate school or that they've graduated. And I just read two, one from a speech pathologist who said these skills are invaluable. I have to communicate with my patients, my young patients and their families and really listen about, how what their child is experiencing is affecting not only their child, but the family, the dynamic, all of those things. And so they're doing a lot more of this than they imagined that they would be doing in speech pathology or physical therapy or, I had a student who talked about how important it is to be able to listen to patients who are experiencing pain and how that shapes their experience of not only their physical wellness, but their overall, wellness. And so, I haven't had that experience even for students who've gone in different directions or they seem to really appreciate how much they've learned about interpersonal communication and effective interpersonal communication and its importance.
Then what it sounds like you've done is just convince all our listeners that they need this class in their curriculum, right? Like what other psych class is batting 1,000, not research methods. My primary assignment. We are getting close to 20 minutes and I like to, sort of keep things under half an hour, but I also like to let our guests talk about something that didn't come up that they think might be valuable to listeners, either about what we've been talking about or, as you mentioned, right, you all do things beyond this course. So we'll reverse order what we did for introductions, and I'll let you go first, Christian.
No pressure.
That's right.
I think, one of the things that makes this class most effective is that we're willing to be vulnerable with them, right? And I think that that's important no matter what we're doing, right, in terms of educating, but that, we're actually recognizing that they have a lot to offer us too, that we can take the same risks that they can, obviously with boundaries and with reason. But I mean, Dr. Pica designed an assignment where on the first day of class, everyone brings in 3 objects that mean something to them. You get to choose, right? And that's the beauty of anything. I get to choose how personal I go. I get to choose how much I share, but we do it first, right? And we demonstrate like, hey, I will be vulnerable in this vulnerable space with you because I'm asking you to be vulnerable with us for an entire semester. And I mean, I think being able to be present, I think being able to model what we're asking of our students really does help in these type of courses where we're asking them to reveal so much of, maybe some of their fears or, perceived weaknesses in preparation.
Great. Model vulnerability. Thank you. Yeah, please, Cinzia.
No, I would piggyback on that. I think that the kind of relationships that are built in this course feel qualitatively different for me than in other courses, because we are talking about our own experience while we are practicing these skills. We talk about the fact it's not an acting class, so no matter how small the issue or whatever you choose to share, in order for us to be able to read facial expressions and movement, they have to be authentic. And so, as Christian mentioned, we participate in the exercises too. We allow students to interview us. We do the same exercises and role plays that we're asking them to do. And so they do appreciate it's quite humanizing to be in the classroom space, and it's clear that we are co-constructing the learning, and there are times when we are interviewed by a student and they make this really perceptive observation, and we all sort of congratulate the student and note like how well they used a skill, and it builds confidence, it builds safety and trust to be able to do these things that can be very vulnerable in front of each other.
Can I just say one thing off of that is, this is probably one of the classes where I am most impressed, right? Because you talked about them wanting to run away, in how much they build each other up. And what you said, Cinzia, just made me think of that, that when you ask them for feedback on, how they feel like something went, because we have them reflect and then, share back out. 9% of the time, my students will say, I thought that my partner did a really great job with this skill, and this is how they did it. And it's like this instant, of building one another up, understanding, right, the shared vulnerability that's happening, right, and really wanting, right, everyone to feel comfortable, but also, it's that nice kind of aspect of hearing them say, like, I thought this was really great what they did. They really mastered this, or they said this to me and it was perfect, right? Instead of, I think I did this well, I think I didn't do this well. And it's a really nice feel. I mean, I think we create some of that. I mean, I'm not afraid to tell my students about the times I have, blundered something in the workforce, right? Because we've all been there and none of us are perfect. And there's always a whopper or two that's embarrassing out there in your history, but that allows them to realize they can be human too, right? That we're humans doing this work, right? And that we're actually human first.
Mm-hmm. And I think one of the interesting things for me is the reaction that students who self-identify as either shy or anxious or introverted, that as the semester unfolds, and certainly at the conclusion of the semester, that they are so proud of having done something that was intimidating, and that they imagined all of the extrovert students would do so much better, and they realize, actually, I did this. It was scary, and I did it and learned and feel very confident in their capacity to sit across from someone that they don't know, and communicate effectively.
All right. Well, those sound like fantastic course outcomes. Thank you so much. Today, I have been chatting with Drs. Christian William and Cinzia Pica, both from Assumption University. Listeners, did today's episode make you realize you have a question you would like someone to answer? I would be happy to take it into consideration and find a guest that can help. But what I need you to do is head over to our Google form at bit.ly/AskPsychSessions.